So now we've talked about what a demand curve is, what it really represents. We can start talking about, well, what else would cause changes in demand, or how can we talk about different shapes of demand curves and all the rest of it. So what we're going to start with is price elasticity of demand. So this is kind of what it says on the tin. It's like, how elastic is your demand with the price? How much does the quantity that you're willing to get vary with price? So remember that movements in price cause movements along demand curves, because it's how much do you like a given good or service, that's such that you're willing to actually pay the price for a certain quantity of it. So e.g., at this price, you're happy to buy that amount. It's the curve. So the elasticity is saying, well, how much is the price affecting the quantity? So how much does any given change in price, let's say going down, increase my quantity in this example? That's price elasticity of demand in terms of the general principle of it. So to give you some examples, this is very inelastic because my quantity is not really changing, even as my price changes. A very big reduction in my price has a very small effect on the quantity that I want to consume. So a classic example is food. It might not be quite as steep as this, but there is a limit to how much food, hopefully, there is a limit to how much food we will eat. And so for changes in price, yeah, it will be somewhat elastic, right? Especially at very high price levels where you couldn't afford food. Maybe at that point you stop eating as much. But within reason, and maybe when it becomes dirt cheap, you're like, screw it, I'm going to eat loads. But within reason, hopefully, you don't change how much you eat that much with changes in price. Whereas something that's more of a luxury, that's a treat that you could or could not have, might be more price elastic. So, for example, a Netflix subscription, I would imagine, would be a lot more price elastic if you're, say, in the lower middle class. Because, if the price goes up, then you're going to say, well, would it be worth £20 a month for one person? Well, maybe, but maybe not. Would it be worth £5 a month? Or for loads of people, they go, yeah, that's a great deal. That £5 a month, and I can watch all of this stuff. That's great. So it's very sensitive to price. Although I chose extreme prices to illustrate my point, but you could see how a reduction in price from up here to a price down here could result in a big change in quantity. So that would be something that's very elastic. It's also PED, or price elasticity of demand. So it tends to be negative because, look, the price is going down as the quantity is increasing. So if we're thinking of this as a change in quantity for a given change in price, well, typically if the price is going up, then the quantity change is going to be negative, and the other way around. So the price elasticity of demand is going to be negative. Hopefully that all makes sense. It's kind of how sensitive are we to price, basically. How price sensitive is our good. Now, if we want to talk about an actual definition, actual formula, it's this. We think about it in terms of percentage change. So it's percentage change in the quantity demanded for any percent divided by percentage change in price. So typically, if we want to make this easy to interpret, we would say there's 1% change in price, or what would have to be the percentage change. That's another way of thinking of price elasticity of demand. When this is greater than 1, okay, so quantity is changing by a greater percent than price is changing. So we'd say it's elastic. More negative than -1, typically. If it's like a fraction, if it's between, say, 0 and -1, then we would say, well, look, the quantity is actually changing less as a percentage than the prices. So we'd say, well, that's quite inelastic. And if it's exactly 1 or exactly -1, then we'd say, hey, it's unitary. So we've got inelastic. That is terrible. If the PED is, we're going to assume that it's negative because it is negative for most goods, right? Typically, if something is more expensive, you're more reluctant to buy it. So it's inelastic if it's more than -1, i.e. if it's like less negative. So less negative, closer to 0 than -1. It's elastic if it's more negative. So it's the quantity is very sensitive to the price. And unitary if -1. The percentage change in quantity is the same as the percentage change. And that is your introduction to price elasticity of demand.